Velkommen ind for i studiet til endnu en PIB special, hvor vi i denne her omgang skal snakke om en specifik klub, ligesom vi tidligere har snakket Leeds, en udsendelse, som mange af jer har set, og tusind tak for det. Så skal vi i de kommende minutter udelukkende snakke Luton Town. Luton Town som klub debuterer i Premier League, når sæsonen går i gang til august, og det er mildest talt en fantastisk historie, at Luton allerede, om man så må sige, har nået Premier League. Med mig som selskab i studiet, der har jeg Ollie Kay, som til daglig er med til at lave podcasten We Are Luton Town. Så han har mildest talt fingeren på pulsen i alt, hvad der foregår omkring Luton Town. Og han vil fortælle os præcis, hvorfor det er en fantastisk historie, at Luton er i Premier League. So, Ollie Kay, very good of you to have you in the studio, so to speak, with us. Thank you very much for taking part in this.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for, getting in touch and asking us to come on.
Well, of course, and congratulations to getting into the Premier League. That was some nerve-wracking finale. Were you present at Wembley?
Yeah, I was there. To be honest, it hasn't really sunk in that we're going to be in the Premier League. I was there that day, and to be honest, the first half, it was plain sailing. It was looking good, even though Tom Lockyer had his episode, but he's now fine. And then the second half, some hairy moments. And then when it went to penalties, I've seen us lose penalty shootouts. I've only seen us win one in the entire time that I've followed the club. So I didn't think it was going to happen, to be honest. But here we are.
Here you are, and that is one excellent story, and that's the one, and you're going to tell us exactly why this is a fantastic story. But first of all, start by introducing yourself and your colleagues from We Are Luton Town.
Yeah, so I'm Ollie, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the Walt Pods, which is part of We Are Luton Town. My other co-host, who can't be here today, is Ian Robertson. And We Are Luton Town was founded in 2009, and it's the #1 supporter group, fan-led supporter channel for Luton Town across Facebook, Twitter, and the Walk Pod is our way, the next step in terms of there are many great Luton Town podcasts, but we felt We Are Luton Town needed a podcast to discuss the Premier League, because there's obviously so much to discuss, and we're hoping to bring our zany insights to the global Premier League audience.
Of course. How long have you been following Luton Town?
So my first game, my dad took me to the which is Kenilworth Road, in the 95-96 season. And
95-96, that's some years ago.
Yeah, well, I'm still quite young though, because most Luton Town fans that I talk to, they always talk about the old First Division, and like, well, you just had to be there. Well, we're there now, back in the top division, so that's great. Even my dad forgets how old I am sometimes. He's like, "Were you there with me in '88 when we beat Arsenal and won the League Cup?" Like, no, I was born 2 months later. So, to be honest, the last 30 years are just sort of squashed into, one horrendous time warp for Luton Town fans, because it's been such a ride. Really has.
Yeah. So what you say, We Are Luton Town, where can people find you? Twitter, Facebook, podcast, where you find your podcast usually?
Yeah, so on Facebook, you can find us at We Are Luton Town. On Twitter, you can also find us at We Are Luton Town. For the podcasting arm of We Are Luton Town, you can find us at The Walk Podcast. That's on Twitter. We also have a YouTube, which is also The Walk Podcast.
Excellent. Then, first of all, congratulations on your new Danish player, Mads Andersen. What do you make of his arrival from Barnsley? He's a captain at Barnsley.
Yeah, and he's a player that's always impressed me. I believe he's actually the fourth Danish player we've had. We've had Lars Elstrup, Johnny Vilstrup, Morten Hildegard, and now Mads Andersen. They weren't all great, but as long as he's more Lars Elstrup, then Johnny Vilstrup. I think we're cooking.
Lars Elstrup was good. There's a lot of Danes, like myself, older Danes perhaps, who remember Luton because of Lars Elstrup knocking in the goals.
Yeah, he was a character as well, wasn't he? Real character.
He was a character, and he developed into even a bigger character after he left Luton.
Oh, yes, I've read about that. I've seen the pictures too. Yeah.
That was some story as well. Anyway, I would like to hear more about the roller coaster of a ride it must have been following Luton Town for the past 2 decades. And just to sum it all up, in 2007, you were relegated from the Championship to League One. In 2008, relegated to League Two. 2009, relegated to the National League. 2014, promoted to League Two again. 2018, promoted to League One. 2019, promoted to the Championship. 2023, promoted to the Premier League. That's one heck of a ride and absolutely unprecedented, even in English football. If anything, I imagine it hasn't been boring.
No, not at all. If you actually back that up about 10 years to when I started following the club, some would say I started following the club quite late because we got relegated from the top division in 91-92, the season before it became the Premier League. So we were actually one of the founding members. But my first season following Luton Town, we got relegated from what is now known as the Championship. So that was my first season following the club. We got relegated, and we went all the way down to League Two. And where you start off from when we got relegated from the Championship, we had a mini resurgence. So we went from League Two back up to the Championship, had 2 seasons in the Championship. And then the roller coaster that you mentioned started. But it's been a ride. It has. It's been phenomenal.
How do you hang in there?
You don't have an option. It's your club. No. It's your team. You know, if you're a Luton fan, you're a Luton fan. You don't run away. You don't go watch other clubs. You know, if you're Luton, you're Luton. And we just kept going. Sure, the crowds got a bit smaller, but we always believed. And even when we got relegated to the conference, there was like a silver lining, because we started that season in League Two. I can't remember what year it was, but we started that season in League Two when we got relegated to the conference. We had new owners, our current owners, who are called 2020. And the reason why they called themselves 2020 is because they believed that they would take the club back up to its natural order and position in the English football pyramid, the Championship, by 2020. So, flashing forward, they were ahead of schedule because we were back in the Championship for the 1920 season. So we're back in for 2019. So they're a year ahead of schedule. But going back to that League Two season, we started the season on -30 because of stuff that the previous owners had done. So they, as like a hello for them, it was like, hello, here's -30, which essentially relegated us before a ball was even kicked in League Two. We competed in the Johnson Paint Trophy, and we were bottom of League Two, and we competed against Scunthorpe, who were getting promoted from League One to the Championship. And the funny thing is, it's actually cruel how football works. So we were going down to the National League, and Scunthorpe were going to the Championship. Whereas now, 20 years later or so, or 15 years later, Scunthorpe have just been relegated from the National League and are now going to be competing in the National League North, which is the league below the National League.
Or something,
yeah. It's crazy how things change so quickly. And Luton are getting promoted from the Championship to the Premier League. It's crazy how we've gone that way, they've gone that way. It's cruel football.
Yeah.
But going back to the conference, our owners cut their teeth in the conference, and they probably were a bit flippant, thinking, oh yeah, this is gonna be easy. You know, we have one of the biggest budgets here. We can just go straight back up. But it's 5 years, 5 seasons in the conference, and 5 managers.
5 seasons and 5 managers.
Yeah.
Okay. But what initially led to that downfall from the championship down to the National League in such quick time?
Can't really. The easy answer is just to say it was a case of poor ownership. But there are so many reasons. Luton was a basket case of a club for a number of years. There were so many factors in the decade leading up to that, like the collapse of ITV Digital, meaning there was a TV package that was going to be given out to a TV financial package that was going to be given out to all the clubs across the EFL from ITV, which is one of the large broadcasters in England. And ITV Digital collapse, leaving a lot of clubs in financial ruin. And it's what you see these days, clubs spending beyond their means. So we got promoted to the championship, and you mentioned before our back-to-back relegations.
Yeah.
It was built on poor financial management, a lot of debt. And there was always something going on at the club. There was an investigation into illegal payments to agents, which I wouldn't say are illegal. It's no worse than what a lot of clubs these days do every day, and with bigger amounts of money passing between club to agent. But we got the sharp end of the stick there, and when we got relegated from the championship, because of our finances were a bit of a mess, but also that championship relegation season, just things weren't going right. Our manager threw his toys out of the pram. He wasn't happy with the club. That was Mike Newell at the time, who famously scored the first hat-trick in the Champions League for Blackburn, I believe. He scored the fastest hat-trick, perhaps.
Yeah.
So he was a former Luton player, and he was our manager that took us up from League One to the Championship in the mid-2000s. So Mike Newell left the club, and then Kevin Blackwell came in, and then the wheels really came off for Luton Town.
Okay.
And there's stuff behind the scenes, like, you know, trying to sell players for personal financial benefits, and it all went wrong. And then administration followed, and then we got new owners, and then another administration followed, and then a points deduction. So we got 10-point deduction. Then we dropped into League Two, and then we got hit with a 30-point deduction. So that's 40 points over 2 seasons. So you can just see it was just a catastrophic failure from within the club. It was unprecedented. It really was. And that's what we needed the new owners in for. A sort of hard reset of the club from top to bottom. The whole ethos just changed.
And I assume it has changed since you are now from what 09 to 2023 National League to the Premier League.
Since the new owners have come in, the ethos hasn't really changed around the club. We still play to the same the ethos around the club hasn't really changed since 2009. The owners still have the same ethos, belief in the club. They've always maintained that they will not take money from gambling companies, and that is a position that the vast majority of Luton Town fans can get behind. We're all happy with that position. One thing that has changed since we've got back into the Football League is our recruitment has gotten much better. In the conference, the recruitment was a bit hit and miss, I would say. But in terms of the ethos that runs throughout the club, it's like chalk and cheese from 2009 to present and what came before.
Okay. can you look back and say that there was one decisive point where this all changed and things were starting to go forwards again? Or was that when the new owners came in, the present owners came in?
Well, no. It didn't feel like, seasons after 4 seasons in the conference, it didn't feel like things were moving forward. At the end of our 4th season in the conference, we just finished 7th under Paul Buckle. Sure, we made history. We became the first National League side to beat a Premier League side in the FA Cup, since those competitions had been renamed as such. Since the inception of the Premier League, we beat Norwich 1-0. And that Norwich team had a young Harry Kane in it, funnily enough, but he didn't bother us that day. It was Harry Kane before he was Harry Kane, I would say.
Okay.
But that season was very doom and gloom. It was our lowest finish pretty much in our modern history. It didn't look great. I would say the big turning point came when our 5th manager number 5 came in to through the doors at Kenilworth Road in our foray into the conference, and that was John Still. And John Still set the groundwork for what we are now. And you will still see him around the club. Sure, he's not affiliated with the club in any position, but he is there around the club. And he was at Wembley when we went up. He was around the club this season, coming to games, because John Still is a remarkable man, and he set the tone for what slingshotted us up the leagues. With his recruitment, he pretty much cleared out the team, brought in all the players that he wanted. At first, it didn't look like it was going to be a great season. We started our National League Championship winning season a bit shaky. But he brought in the players that he wanted, and the crowds were not happy with what was going on. And there was famously a bust-up between our club captain at the time, Ronnie Henry, and someone in the crowd. It almost came to blows. Like as Ronnie Henry and the team were coming off the pitch, one person from the crowd, was really angry with the start to the season. But John Still saw that as an opportunity to get the fans on side. So he would go and get a member from the crowd into the team huddle post-match. And that really got the fans back on side. And remember, we were in the conference, so the club needed to be dragged back together. The club and the fans were the furthest apart they'd ever been at that point. And it really got everyone back on side and aligned. And that alignment between the club and the fans is really a cornerstone of how we've progressed over the past decade.
Yeah. But so not even in the years in the National League, there was sort of like just a bit of calm over the club. It sounds like even that was a turbulent time.
The ownership was calm. Like 2020 were there. They were happy, like getting their feet under the table. Yeah. The ownership was fine. Yeah. But there's all the stuff behind the scenes, like when you get relegated from the Football League, you drop a lot of money. The funding, the Football League financing is not coming to the club. There are parachute payments, but they run out, and they're not like Premier League parachute payments. So there was a requirement for a lot of investment, especially in our academy. And we lost a lot of the jewels from our academy. I'm sure you've heard of Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis, who were tearing it up in Norwich. Max Aarons is still at Norwich, but I believe he's leaving this summer. We had a lot of players from our academy that essentially were not interested in continuing their development at a non-league academy. Interestingly, the season we went down, we won an under-9 youth tournament called the Aral Masters. I believe we beat Bayern Munich in the final, and that team consisted of players like James Justin, Max Aarons, Jamal Lewis. it had some big hitters that have gone on to have outstanding careers. But the problem was that season we got relegated, and things like academies cost money to run. And also you lose your category ratings and all the associated stuff. So again, foundations and fans had to get on side to, sort of pump money into the club and the youth development and prop up the club for what they thought would be a swift return to the Football League, which, as it turned out, was not as swift as anyone thought it was going to. It wasn't as swift as we all thought it was going to be.
It wasn't swift at all.
No, 5 years. It was a long time, really long time, like an eternity.
Yeah.
Well, when you're living it, it's like a hell that just will never end. To be honest, I still feel like I'm going to wake up. I've been saying this on so often to my friends and my dad. I feel like I'm going to wake up and, we're going to hide away. And the past 10 years have been a dream. It really feels like that.
So you've actually seen matches against, say, Ebbsfleet United, and now next year you're going to see Manchester City.
Yeah, it's not to discredit any of the teams in the conference. They have their football heritage, they have history, and it's tremendous. You go to these clubs and they're fantastic. Sure, the pitches aren't great, and you're seeing some, you're not seeing champagne football by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the heart's there. And all I recommend is that if you don't go see a team in the Premier League, try and get down to non-league football, even if it's just Sunday league stuff, people kicking the ball about like in organised teams at the park, because you got to support the grassroots. And the grassroots, the base of the English pyramid, is strong, and that allows the rest of the pyramid to thrive. And you'll see some amazing stories like Pele Ruddock Mpanzu, who dropped down from John Still signed him from West Ham, and he joined Luton in the conference, and he's had a remarkable progression up to the Premier League with Luton Town. And there are other players that have been taken from non-league and flourished in the Premier League, like Jamie Vardy. There is some real talent in the National League, and below, it's incredible stuff.
Yeah. I take it the situation with club and the fans are pretty unique today, given your progression over the past years and ownership who has been remaining calm all through the years.
Yeah, well, it's very tight knit, and I don't know if I mentioned earlier, the owners of the club 2020 are fans. They are long-standing fans. They were very important in one of so they are sort of an offshoot of the Luton Town Supporters Trust, which is one of the most influential supporter trusts in England. And the Supporters Trust was born out of something called Trust in Luton, and there's a great documentary about the formation of Trust in Luton, which became the LTST, Luton Town Supporters Trust, called Trouble at the Top. It's a BBC documentary, and it tells the story of one of our owners, a really bad one, who was only in for about 40 days or so, called John Gurney. And a lot of Luton Town fans that watch this, they recoil at the name John Gurney, but he's a vital figure in the history of Luton Town, because he essentially he was the first thing that mobilized Luton Town fans in the modern game, whereby Trust in Luton were formed to get Luton Town fans to stop buying season tickets, try and force him out. John Gurney came in to asset strip the club. He had no interest in putting any money in. He just wanted to take. And eventually the formers of Trust in Luton, in the most important of which were Tony Murray and Gary Sweet. So Gary Sweet is now the CEO, the chief exec of 2020, who runs Luton. But they figured out there was something called a debenture, which is essentially a big debt that the club owed someone. And they bought that debt and they called it in, ousting John Gurney from the club. Unfortunately, Gary Sweet wasn't in a position at the time to take control of the club, so we went on and had 2 more bad owners and 2 more administrations. But that's football. It's that's the football financial side of it is part of the rich tapestry and the roller coaster. But the underlying thing that threads the fans to the club is because of 2020. Because you will see Gary Sweet, you'll see David Wilkinson, the chairman, in the pubs pre-game. And they will be buying drinks for fans. They'll be chatting. They were sitting in the regular seats before they were directors of the club. So you will see them. And, you know, a lot of the people that I know were sitting around these people back before they were directors of the club. They're just regular fans that just happen to mobilize and buy the club. So it's wonderful. Yeah, okay. It's wonderful, and it really does tie the fans and the club together.
Yeah, I can imagine. But do the fans then accept? Like, I believe Gary Sweet is your CEO. Mm-hmm. Do the fans accept that he's stated that you're going to buy within your limits in the transfer market this season? Are the fans okay with that, or do they want just a little more ambition?
No, I can't speak for the whole fan base. What I have said,
no, of course not.
What I have said repeatedly, and the general consensus, the way I predicted the transfer window to go, I did a media appearance before the playoff final where it was all pie in the sky, the Premier League, we might not get there. So I was very on the fence. But my opinion was, we're not expecting to stay up this season. We're going to give it a right good go. But
absolutely,
if we do go down, Gary Sweet has said on numerous occasions he will not leverage the club's financial future because of where we've been in the past. He will not leverage that. We will stick to a strict budget. And I perceived before the signing of Ogbene and Mads Andersen, I knew that we would use this investment, this influx of cash, to recruit smartly, hoover up the best talent from the top end of League One and maybe the bottom half of the championship, mid-table championship. Hoover up the talent. So not only are we in a good position if we were to go down, but recruiting smartly, like a player like Mads Andersen, he's nowhere near his ceiling. He's 26, I believe. That's not the peak for a defender. And his performances for Barnsley over the past few seasons, he was vital in their run to the playoffs a few years back. And when they got relegated, he missed the beginning of the season. And the beginning of the season's part of the most vital part of the season, because it sets the tone for the rest of the season. And I believe he missed 16 or 17 games. So that was really bad for Barnsley. And obviously they had the upheaval of Ishmael leaving. They lost key players. They lost Daryl DK, who was alone anyway. But I'm going off on a wild tangent when I'm talking about Mads Andersen.
That's okay.
These signings, Ogbene, Andersen, they are smart signings because they're young, they have a very high ceiling, and those are the types of signings that we make. We take broken things, or we take players who have a lot to prove from lower down the football pyramid, and we take them, we build them up. Like, for instance, Elijah Adebayo is a fantastic example. We signed him from Walsall. He was doing really well, but we saw that he was nowhere near his ceiling. I still believe he is nowhere near his ceiling still, but it's smart recruitment like that. Why look overseas when you have an entire football pyramid beneath you, just filled with talent, ready to step up and improve themselves and show themselves off to the world stage. There's so much talent.
Yeah. I believe you have a true club legend as a chief recruitment officer in Mick Harford. Is that true?
So Mick Harford is another thread that's just been permanently parallel with Luton Town. So he first came to the club in, I want to say, 1984. So we were in Division 1984. We signed him from Lincoln, I believe. It was before my time. And the 80s was one of the most successful periods for Luton Town. We're in Division 1 for a decade. We got promoted in the 81-82 season. And then Mick Harford came in 84. 88 was the 87-88 season was when we won the League Cup against Arsenal. We also got to the final again the next season, but we lost to Nottingham Forest. But it was a very good time for the club. Not financially. I've had a look at the financial reports. As I said, football finances are a tricky thing. But it was a good time for the club. And obviously, Division 1 finances were not what they are currently in the Premier League. With success, people want to buy your players. So Mick Harford was snapped up from us. And then a couple of years went by, as well as Mick Harford getting snapped up. Our manager at the time, David Pleat, was also snapped up in the mid-80s. Yeah. But the main thing was Mick Harford was there for when we won the Littlewoods Cup, which was nice. But then in our final season in the old Division 1, David Pleat came back. He brought back Brian Steen. He brought back Mick Harford. Mick Harford was good. He scored a lot of goals that season. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough to save us from relegation. So then Mick Harford left us again. He wouldn't return as a player, unfortunately. However, Mick Harford did come back as assistant manager to Joe Kinnear in, I believe this was 99, 2000, because it's such a 30 years. And as I said, it feels like a big time warp. It's smushed together. I might get some of the dates wrong. Yeah. So Mick Harford came back as assistant manager to Joe Kinnear, who is a well-known former manager for Wimbledon. He's kind of a football league legend in England. And then when John Gurney came in, he sacked both Mick Harford and Joe Kinnear. And funny story, while I'm on John Gurney, he used a... so if you know Pop Idol, if you remember the TV show Pop Idol, or X Factor, as it's now called, John Gurney decided to appoint the next manager by something called Manager Idol, where supporters would call in and essentially pay for their call, and then they would voice who they wanted to manage the club after Joe Kinnear was fired. But the supporters picked Joe Kinnear and Mick Harford overwhelmingly, but the whole thing was rigged anyway, and that's how we got Mike Newell, funnily enough. So that's how Mike Newell came into the club. But Mike Newell was a very good manager. So Joe Kinnear and Mick Harford did not come back. Then Mick Harford came back again. That after Kevin Blackwell was fired on our sort of tumble down the leagues in the late 2000s, Mick Harford came back, and he was again greeted just like 2020. He was greeted by a 30-point deduction. So he was the manager that led us to the JPT, but he was also the manager that took us into the conference. And then he sort of left halfway through our first season in the National League, because I feel he was burning out. He felt he wasn't really cut out for it. But he sort of stayed around the club, and he became the chief recruitment officer, the head of recruitment, and he's been vital in setting the tone for our recruitment since we returned to the Football League. And then he came back briefly as manager after Nathan Jones left us in our League One season. So Nathan Jones left us. We were second in the league. It was a vital time for Luton Town because that week when Nathan Jones left us, we were due to hear about our new stadium. We were waiting on planning permission. And we were also playing against teams like Sunderland, Portsmouth, teams that were competing with us at the top of the table. So Nathan Jones left and Mick Harford comes in as interim manager. And he took us through to the end of the season. We didn't lose a game for 6 months. It was a tremendous experience. And after that, he was like, I'm going to step back now because I have no interest in managing the club. It was just a temporary thing. He did manage us for one match again last season after Nathan Jones left again for Southampton. It's one game. Yeah. Unfortunately, then the World Cup break came at the time, so he could put his recruitment hat back on and bring in Rob Edwards. And he's also had he's done remarkable stuff with raising awareness for prostate cancer, because a lot of men don't realise to get their prostates checked, after the age of 40. And he's had a very public battle, which is very brave to go public with your battle. And he was doing this while he was managing the club in League One and after that. And I believe he's won the battle though with cancer. It's always a continuing battle, but he's a brave man. Yeah. He's a great man, and he truly is a club legend.
That is a club legend. Back and forth since 1984. Mm-hmm. That's legends. Your manager, Rob Edwards, as you say, he brought in. What's your take on him?
Oh, he's great. Rob Edwards is fantastic. All Luton fans are very appreciative that Watford let us have him. In case your fans, your viewers weren't aware, Luton and Watford is a very bitter rivalry that spanned decades.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. Getting sacked from Watford and then taking Luton to the Premier League. Oh my days. Because when he came in, we were 10th in the league. The first half of the season was a bit, it was very mediocre. I felt under Nathan Jones, things had gotten stale. Although Nathan Jones is a remarkable manager. He's a great motivator. But Rob Edwards came in and he just brought that calmness. He was so calm, collected, and that showed on the players. Not only did he let the players enjoy themselves a bit more, he gave a bit more freedom to the players. That calm that he instilled, if you make a mistake in game, he's not going to be barking orders or chasing you down the touchline. Sort of one thing that became sort of prevalent with Nathan Jones is you could, even when the Kenny was full, you could still hear Nathan Jones over all the fans just screaming. and on
he's quite a character.
He's a character. He really is. He's a good manager, and I know whatever team he takes charge of next, he will do really well, providing the club support him. I believe he would have kept Southampton up had the players not sort of just looked at him and been like, "Who's that? Who's Nathan Jones? Yeah, what's he done? He's done a lot. Yeah. He's because he took over from John Still and sort of built on the strong foundations that John Still built. But he did remarkable things with our club as well. And Nathan Jones has become a bit of a sort of satirical character. But
yes, he did. Yeah, actually,
people need to realise there's a tremendous manager under there.
I mean, he did amazing stuff with Luton. That's But it's fair to say it made things even sweeter that Rob Edwards was sacked by Watford before he arrived with Luton and led them into the Premier League.
Poetic. It's wonderful. You couldn't have written it. You couldn't have made it up. It's just ideal.
You think he'll finish the season as Luton manager?
Yeah, of course. unless another team comes in and takes him. Because at the end of the day, money talks, and I'm certain we can't offer him the financial package that, say, a team that's been playing in the Premier League for multiple seasons is able to offer him, because at the end of the day, we adhere to a strict budget. Sure, the budget has now been raised, and famously, we operate with a strict salary cap. So in the Championship, that was, I think, 8,000 per week last season. I would imagine the salary cap will be increased to maybe 25,000 this week. So it will make it difficult for us to sign players. But if someone buys into the collective and what we want to do, then it's a very attractive salary if you believe in the project. And Luton Town are very open with the fact that we know we're a stepping stone. Every football club in world football is a stepping stone, unless you're a Man City, a Real Madrid, or a Barcelona. Every club's a stepping stone. We're just very transparent about it. We'll let players come in. We'll give them a platform to perform, whether they're a player or a manager. And if Rob Edwards was to go, we have lists and reams of analytics for who we would like to replace him. So Rob Edwards was being tracked by the club prior to Nathan Jones leaving. We had been monitoring him for, probably since his Forest Green days.
Yeah. Okay. Which Luton players should the Premier League's global audience look out for in the coming season? Apart from Mads Juel Andersen.
I would say the global audience should... There are a couple of players who could be set to have very good seasons. Alfie Doughty, as I mentioned before, we like signing broken things or players that haven't hit their ceiling. So Alfie Doughty was one that the club had been tracking for a long time. And Stoke signed him. Stoke didn't know how to use him. They'd loaned him out. He came back. He was injured. We took him and we got the best out of him. And he had a tremendous season last year. I believe as a left wing back for fantasy football, he will score big because he sends in a lot of crosses. So he could be getting a lot of assists. On the end of those crosses will be Elijah Adebayo and Carlton Morris. It's very unique that we play with two up top, because a lot of Premier League teams tend to play with wide men and then a player up top, either playing as a false nine, allowing people to sort of fold in around them, or as a target man. So we play with two target men, and I can't pick just one of them. Carlton Morris might be on the end of the moves, but Elijah Adebayo, with his running, as you've seen in the playoff final against Coventry, the goal that we scored was 95% Elijah Adebayo, because as soon as Alfie Doughty won the ball in defence, Elijah Adebayo turned, span his marker, and ran down the channel. And then that run, the running with the ball, the control at his feet, he turned Carl McFadzean inside out and sent him for a hot dog. Carl McFadzean, he was sort of clamouring on the floor, and Elijah Adebayo picked out Jordan Clark to score the goal. So my personal opinion, which Luton fans will laugh at me, if I had to pick one between Elijah Adebayo and Carlton Morris about who's going to have the better season, I choose Elijah Adebayo because he offers more in the build-up. Essentially, there was a quote from that my co-host Ian says all the time about from Catch Me If You Can, which is a great movie with Leo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. And Christopher Walken says in that movie to his son, Leo DiCaprio, why do the Yankees always win? And he thinks, it's because they have Mickey Mantle. No, it's because they're looking at the stripes. So in the case for this analogy, Elijah Adebayo is the stripes, because the opposition defense will be looking at Elijah Adebayo. He will be pulling out to the wing. He will be pulling defenses apart. It doesn't matter if he plays 4 at the back or 3 at the back. Carlton Morris and Elijah Adebayo will stretch you and then leave spaces for attacking midfielders to sort of flood in between. whether that's Jordan Clark or Alan Campbell or Pelly Ruddock.
Okay. Kenilworth Road. Tell us a little about the stadium. What makes it so special, apart from being small?
Well, it's an old stadium. It's a wonderful stadium, though, and if you have a chance to go there, you must go, because it's not going to be around for much longer. I think we got another 2.5 years, 3 years with it. It's a charming stadium, full of character. There's no leg room. If you're over 5'7", you struggle. It's what makes it unique is that you're right on top of the action. Even when you're at the back, you have a great view. I mean, you don't have a great view because there are pillars and posts everywhere, but I mean, you're probably closer when you're at the back of the main stand than you would be in the front row at like a Spurs or a West Ham stadium.
Yeah,
you're right on top of the action, and opposition players hate it, and that was probably seen with the second leg playoff against Sunderland, where the Sunderland players were rattled as they were coming off the pitch from their warm-up, and everyone was booing them as they were coming off the pitch. You could see that they were shaken before the game had even started. And sure, Sunderland had a stadium of like 45,000, but that 10,000 inside Kenilworth Road sounds like 60,000, and that's not an exaggeration. It's a terrifying stadium. It's a noisy stadium. I come back from the Kenny, my ears are still ringing like days later. It's a tremendous stadium, and it has hosted top flight football before, sure, in the 80s. But remember, the stadium's like 105 years old, and it hasn't really changed much since 1984-85 season, when the stands that people tend to call the beach huts, the bobbers, the executive boxes, and funnily enough, those boxes are now being taken. They've been taken down, and they're virtually rebuilding that entire stand between the season, because they have loads of Premier League compliance to come up to spec for. So I believe at last count, Gary Sweet said that's £13 million of improvements. So they're putting in seats, they're putting in TV studios at the back, and 30 to 50 camera positions. So all those pillars and posts that I mentioned before, the view for a lot of fans is about to get much worse. But we don't care, because we're still going to turn up. We're still going to sing our hearts out, make noise, get the Kenny rocking. Oh, it's a tremendous stadium, and the day it goes, it'll be sad. Sure, we'll have a nice new shiny stadium, but it won't be the same. Like they're trying to capture facets of Kenilworth Road and sort of translate it to the new stadium, but I don't think modern compliance allows it, to be honest. So so it won't be the same. It won't be the same at all, because health and safety. But yeah, I encourage everyone to try and get a ticket for Kenilworth Road. It's tremendous.
Well, what game are you looking forward to the most in the coming season?
That's a tough question.
If you had to pick one, I have a gun to your head.
Pick any of the so-called big six. I would say Spurs at home, Spurs at the Kenny, because I feel out of the big six, the perceived big six, even though that's in people's minds and media.
Yeah,
I feel Spurs would get the most rattled at the Kenny than any other team in the Premier League. They feel to me like they're a team that if something doesn't go their way on the pitch, like they will just collapse. So I feel Spurs is the team I'm looking forward to the most coming to the Kenny, and it's the game I'm looking forward to the most, because I feel we could cause an upset, and I can see it now. Social media will just be filled with oh, we should be beating teams like Luton. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to Man City because I feel they could absolutely destroy us.
Well, on a good day, they destroy anyone.
Not looking forward to it.
So, to finish it all off, what's your expectations for the season?
I'm an optimist. I think we can stay up. Yeah, it's probably what you like to hear. I feel that there isn't too much between 13th and 20th in the Premier League. I could be very wrong. But having watched the Premier League for a number of years, that obviously the top half of the table, there's a massive step up in class and budgets. But I feel with an organised defence, sensible recruitment, like more players like Mads Andersen and Chidozie Ogbene, if we just keep that theme, players that want to play for the shirt, players that are really motivated and together, and we keep our style of play, I feel we could surprise a few people, especially with home form at Kenilworth Road, which will be so important. So I believe we will stay up. That's my opinion.
Well, all three promoted teams stayed up this season.
Yeah, they did. So that gives me encouragement. And you know, we're certainly not doing a Nottingham Forest. We're not signing 30 new players. We'll sign no more than 8, 10 at a push, and that might include developmental signings that will be future stars at Luton Town. I'm optimistic.
Ollie Kay, thank you so much for telling us all this stuff about Luton. It was
Thank you for having me.
You.